Welcome all to Psychology Debunking Mythology session today. We have an amazing guest from Singapore, and he has co-authored many papers. He speaks regularly, and he is very well known amongst the Indian circles and some international forums from the Indian point of view. But it's a great honor to have him here and hear him. And we're going to talk about victims or perpetrators, especially the attacks that we see regularly on the basis of faith, community, the color of the skin, and many other things. Now, in the US, our problems are a little bit different, but gradually, with all the immigration, we're importing the world's problems in the US too. So we are becoming one, kind of merging, like we are merging in the ocean, the fresh water, salt water, everything is getting united. So we have this special guest who is going to take us deeper into all these areas. And without delay, you can always search him on online. Anurag, and the last name is Saxena. And the Twitter handle has one additional Anurag. So please search him out and find out yourself, and let's welcome him. So welcome,
Namaskar.
Anurag.
My honor and pleasure to be here, given all the amazing work that you are doing along with your team. It's usually people have mutual fan clubs, but I think we are a mutual energizing club here. So I'm as happy and honored to be here, knowing very well what you're working towards and this larger cause, not just for our people, but for humanity. And I'm so happy, to share a screen with you.
Thank you so much. And Ragji, it's a real honor to have you here. And what you have done is phenomenal. And I mean, I would say that the way you have been working and sending positive vibrations through your work, and so you must be facing a lot of challenges also. So what are the challenges that you face in doing what you do?
Well, so let me just quickly introduce my relevance to this audience, and so that context will be very important to understand the challenge with what we do. So I co-founded this effort called the India Pride Project, where a lot of our temple murtis and heritage that gets stolen or taken away from Bharat, from India to the rest of the world. Um, it is our effort to build awareness, to negotiate, and bring back this heritage to wherever it was taken from. As my friend Ananda Shankar Jayantji, who I'm sure you know is a Padma Award winner and very, one of the most wonderful human beings. So as she says, history belongs to its geography. So a lot of what we do is premised on the idea that when temples were made or when heritage was made or constructed, it was with a particular objective in mind. It was meant for a particular community. These are objects of faith in villages, towns, wherever it is. Nobody looks at, if you go into a temple, nobody considers a deity as just a piece of stone. You see, the Western world might not differentiate between, let's say, a painting or a sculpture or a murti or an ancient coin. But for India, a murti, for example, has a very different emotional value. So a lot of our work is raising awareness about what these objects mean. You talked about the challenges, and I think there are broadly three categories of challenges we face. One is there is an absolute lack of awareness, and I don't want to be negative about the West or whatever, but in the West and to a large extent in India, right? Nobody understands the larger objective that you really do not have a civilization unless you have symbols of that civilization, right? I ask people, why do you respect a flag? It's just a rectangular piece of cloth. You respect it because it symbolizes your nation. Similarly, if you believe in the civilization, then what are the symbols of that civilization? How can you not reclaim that with pride? So a large part of that is building awareness. Our second challenge is domestically within India. Unfortunately, this is not prioritized as a policy issue. or as an issue that the government would deal with the urgency that it is needed. So we have that. And the third, of course, is the resistance. Right, we always have resistance from either people that don't share the sense of pride, as I know that you do and I do, or of course there are people with agendas who are, somebody will try and take credit, somebody, koi footage khayega, koi kuch karega. So there is all sorts of opposition and friction and constraints that we have to cut through. But that's fine. I mean, that is, you and I are too old to take on a challenge that is not big enough. So yeah, things have been going great. In fact, it gives me a lot of pride when you have, an Angela Merkel as an example, who goes up on stage and offers a murti back to Modi ji, or the prime ministers of, say, Australia, Canada have done that over the last few years. You're in the US, so US is a great example. I mean, 4 years back, when Prime Minister Modi was in Washington, USA officially offered back 200 antiquities to India, and it was the biggest ever in India's history, at least. So and we had a very small part to play in it. You have the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Culture, the embassies, a whole bunch of people involved. But I'm so happy and proud when you see visibly something that you work towards so much and something that you're so passionate about. When you see it changing India's position in the eyes of the world, it is just very enriching. It's just very satisfying.
No, you're so true, and you hit the nail there that these are important symbols of our culture, and which for a Western person, especially person who's brought up in Christian values, may not understand the importance. It's not just a symbol; it's like a deeply connected to the culture. And you also mentioned important things about difference between a deity and a statue. So statues can be broken, but not deities. So these deities
Absolutely.
were purposely broken in India and shipped abroad through the Italian mafia, Indian Italian mafia. Because when I went to the Rome, and I've been there a couple of times for my talks over there, and because the University of Rome, the FCI, what they call it, and they took me and they showed me Krishna Murtis, 4,000 years old, 3,500 years old, and they're just kept it on the doors of some antiquity shops. So when I saw them, and then I realized the extent of plundering which India has gone through. Like coming
Yeah,
back to,
absolutely. It is.
mm, yes, please.
Sorry, can I? Given that it is Saturday night here, I am going to take the liberty of disagreeing with you, Satsangi ji. Uh, I think you mentioned the point that people who do not come from our culture might not see the value of a murti versus a statue. Uh, it is understandable, but the minute you communicate it to them in their context and say, hey, listen, if somebody stole or forcefully took away the shroud of Turin, right, which Jesus was supposed to be buried in, would it be okay with you if we replaced it and said, you know what, it's a 3 meter piece of cloth, big deal, it's anyway old, it's anyway jaded, so why don't you just forget about it? Let us just give you a really nice piece of, very fine muslin and very fine silk, which is way better than what we took away. The Shroud of Turin, as an example, is symbolic of way more. It is way more than a piece of cloth. It is the collective memory or a correct collective symbol of a person that, let's say, Christian considered very very important. So I think we have to re-articulate a lot of our claims and our history, and like you're doing with Sathology, we have to re-articulate it in a language that everyone understands. And I'm glad they now do. It has taken us so much time. It has taken me personally so much time to re-educate a whole bunch of stakeholders. Unfortunately, this was a very academic issue in India till we set up India Pride Project. So people worked on, visual mapping and documentation and provenance and all of that, but nobody really worked on shifting the levers when it came to building the narrative, working on policy, working with government institutions, working with foreign, museums, stakeholders, governments, etc. But they'll get it, boss. And at the end of the day, India and China are anyway becoming so much stronger that it would be very difficult a few years from now for people to ignore us and view us through a colonial lens that many still do, unfortunately.
No, you're very right. I think the word Sathology challenges the mythology directly. It's like a true
Yeah,
entity. So when we say
absolutely.
Sathology, then everything gets defeated. And so your
Yeah.
project actually ties into with us in a big way.
Oh,
What
absolutely.
what you're doing is exactly we believe in, and that's what we talk about. And also gradually the mindset is changing, and many students here who are watching us will agree that the mindset about the spiritualism coming from India has changed drastically over the last 40 years, completely. It's like many of the people, the majority of the Americans, I think 45% of Americans believe in spirituality more than the dogmatic Christian or Islamic or other ideals, which is they say it from the book, coming from the book.
Hmm.
Europe, the problem is a little bit different because Europe is a older civilization and more people have been very old connected to their ground. So Europe is a little bit different than US.
Hmm.
And I have tried to understand Europe, but it's not possible for. I think I don't have the intellectual level to understand where they go. So I would rather stay with the Americans here because we are more simpler and straightforward. And also, today is Independence Day. Tomorrow is Independence Day here. So
Hmm.
tomorrow we believe in more freedom from Europeans, from the British, and
Absolutely.
and Americans. One thing good about here is that you can demand things and you can get it done. Like for example, most of the museums are privately owned. And so, if any artifact is in the US and you present them a rational thought that it belongs to India and actually I can replace you with a replica, everybody is willing to accept it. They would rather make a donation there. That's not a problem. With Europe is something different. If you go to British Museum and you have a Krishnamurti, I saw the one Krishnamurti, 2,500 years old. There, it's a colonial pride. So we ruled you, we got as an artifact, but America is not like that. I mean, there is no such thing attachment to that old statue here. And
Hmm.
so my one of my would like to request you to tell us more about the India project, Pride project, and in what areas where American universities or the students can help you, because there are a lot of them
Hmm.
watching, and if they would like to get involved with you, that is one fantastic area to know. And before you answer that question of mine, so how deep is this problem that you are describing about the stolen artifacts from India?
Well, so for your for your second question, I only have my opinion or ideas to share. For the first question, I will use data from sources that is far more credible than I am. Now, back in 1989, the United Nations came out with a report which said that in the short period prior to 1989, that 50,000 pieces of heritage were removed from India. That's 50,000, right? So we're talking of really huge numbers. Uh, for those of your audience who are either in India or who grew up in India, we know that our law enforcement mechanism, our police, is not as effective as even they would like to be. India has the lowest per capita availability of policemen, which makes us structurally incapable of handling these things. And a lot of these, forts and museums and temples get stolen, and the report also doesn't get filed with the police, right? So there is, but you go back, you just do a simple Google search, and every week you will find reports of some piece of a faith object, a murti, a museum, a fort getting stolen. So it's a huge problem, and it still continues. Um, the pre 1947 challenge is a very different challenge. The pre 1947 challenge is more about ideology, right? Where our claim is very simple. When you decided to colonize India, there's a very simple message to the Brits, and we're consistently seeing it getting accepted. And very interestingly, it's starting with the young, it's starting with college campuses where people are more bohemian, where they still have a sense of fairness, they have a sense of equity, and they seem to get this message. And the message is really simple. When you colonized us, you took three things away from us. You took our lives away, you took our mineral and other resources away, copper and steel and gold, and you took our heritage away. Now, you cannot give back the lives you took away from us. That's gone. There is no way to account for or give back the resources you took away from us. Now, the one tangible thing that you can give back is our heritage. And there's no reason you should not give it back to us, right? It is the only remnant of colonial thought that Britain is still sticking on. You cannot be proud of what your grandfather stole from mine. It's a very simple ideological construct. It's not, you don't need a PhD to understand this. This is not rocket science. So we see this message which is percolating down fairly well. If people want to join in, if people want to help, the one help India Pride Project needs from you as a viewer is to start talking more and more about this issue and raising your voice. We need to get to a stage where the needle shifts from this cause or mudda or whatever being irrelevant to becoming relevant. Once the needle shifts from irrelevance to relevance, once people are forced to take a stand, they will have to take a moral stand. It has happened with race issues in the US. It has happened with gender issues in the US. It has happened with the LGBT issues. Each of these issues were irrelevant, right? The oppressor will never want you to talk about the issue. I mean, their game is that I will oppress you and you will take it. You will take it quietly. That is what any abusive relationship is about. A guy getting drunk and beating up his wife. That is the assumption he comes in with, that you will take, pardon my French, but you will take crap from me and never push back on it. So we need for all of us to stand up and say, no, enough is enough. We are willing to push back. And like it happened with race issues, gender issues, sexuality issues, etc., etc., we will hit a stage where there will be enough noise for people to take a stand on it. And that's one very, write about it, tweet about it, get newspapers to cover this issue, write a letter to your senator, write a letter to your museum. I can imagine the impact of a museum getting 50 letters saying, hey, do you know you have this murti? Do you know what this means to the village it was stolen from? It's just sensitizing and building strength like that.
So it's a great point that you made. There is a very famous saying, when the duck which quacks the loudest gets the cracker. And
absolutely.
And in the Western world, unless you make a claim for your identity, nobody gives you the identity, because oftentimes the highest price is paid for the identity, whether you call it a branding or you call it your profile or whatever. So Indians or India has to make that choice, because so far we haven't asked, and that's a problem.
Now, well, you see, if Latino heritage matters, if African American heritage matters, right? If Indian American heritage matters, then Indian heritage should also matter. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Today, we are the biggest donor bloc, whether you look at Democrats or Republicans, both at a senatorial level and through the primaries to the election. After the Jews and after a couple of country club groups, We are a very strong bloc, both from a electoral funding point of view and from a votes point of view. Right, Indian Americans, I mean, if you were to look at a lot of races that came in and settled from the outside, Indian Americans have made a name that very many others haven't been able to. Right, it could be the Sikhs who are running, a certain set of businesses. It could be the Patel motels. It could be, gas stations. It could be, the Googles and Microsofts of the world. It could, I just feel that we don't realize how relevant we are to the America that we see today. And I don't think Indians, I mean, no offense to anybody, but I don't think Indian Americans collectively get together and demand enough from America and say very proudly, look, here is what we have done for the US. We now want to see what you can do for us. And I think that's very important.
So, so there is a definition of an American Hindu which is also being in the works. Like for example, when we say American Hindu here, and many of the viewers probably may not be connected to Hinduism, but just I'm making a relevant point for Manoj for Anurag. So the American Hindu includes a Hindu from South Asia, can be Pakistan, can be Fiji, can be, sorry, Bangladesh or India, and also Fijian Hindus. And then there are Hindus from South America, there are Hindus from Europe, then there are Hindus, Native Americans also, in a way that we are connecting with them. So American Hindus is a larger subset, bigger than Indian American, because there is a
Yeah,
large growing
absolutely.
population of yoga lovers. Is almost like 40 million people. Now,
Yeah,
for all of them, what you talk is or do is very important, because uh, in USA, Bombay may not be famous. I mean, Bombay is a trade capital of India, or other things, but Rishikesh is definitely very famous.
true.
Rishikesh is something which many Americans would like to go there as a yoga capital of the world. That's what they refer to in an informal way.
Absolutely.
And for them,
You see,
what you,
sorry, can I interrupt you for a bit just to continue on that? I keep telling my children this, that when George Harrison and Boy George decide to make a song on Indian themes, right? It is Hare Rama, it is Hare Krishna. It is not about Dilip Kumar or Amitabh Bachchan or, it's not about Indira Gandhi or whoever was prime minister then. So, we have to be very cognizant the of the India that is perceived and valued in the rest of the world.
correct.
India is not known for its roads and buildings and infrastructure or military might or any of that stuff. Right? We are known because we have ancient wisdom and a civilizational heritage that most of the other countries do not have. You see, America, as developed as it could get, right?
Yeah.
It it can and will be ahead of India in whatever it feels like. It can afford to do that. The one thing America will not have is a 1,000-year-old history or 5,000-year-old
Exactly.
history. It
Exactly.
cannot have that, right?
Cannot have that.
Now, if there are people who are interested in continuity, if there are people who are interested in, if there are people who are interested in ancient wisdom, in tradition, in culture, in heritage, they can find it locally in very limited forms, right? Which is also perhaps why the Western society is very individualistic. While most Asian societies, especially Indians, we happen to stay very collectivist. You see, uh, while I was in the US, I used to joke with some of my friends that what is a Thanksgiving party for you is an average Sunday night dinner for us back at home, right? And I see the world looking for that kind of bonding, for that kind of emotional connect, for that kind of social and emotional safety nets in each other, right? Where I know that if something happens to me, you are there for me. You know, if something happens to you, I am there for you. That is what it should be about. You know, it should not be about me more than you, me better than you. It doesn't matter. I mean, the difference between a really selfish guy and an unselfish guy is $5 million that you leave to your kids. That's it, right? if I'm a pure pious guy that has invested all my life in in generating blessings and goodwills and familial bonds, I've spent my time doing what I want, etc., etc., I'll die with $1 million in my bank account, right? If you're exactly the opposite, you've made enemies, people have cursed you all your life, you've been a total badass, blah blah blah, you'll die with $6 million in your bank, right? How does it matter, right? I've led a wholer life, a wholer life and a holier life. And I think the world is starting to realize that very rapidly. I mean, I don't think this is a slow change. This is a very, very, if you look at the Pew research in the US, some of the numbers there are staggering. The 2018 research, which said that people who consider themselves agnostic or atheist or non-believers have finally gone beyond that 50% mark, which is a huge social change. And a lot of these blokes, if you ask them, they'll tell you we meditate, we're vegans, we love yoga, we love the ideas of camaraderie, brotherhood, etc., etc. We love ordering a turmeric latte or a golden latte. And I tell them, look, I mean, don't you realize you've already decided that who you are. You just don't know it yet, you know. Um, so I think there's this huge opportunity.
See the like you said also, you acknowledged also, the identity of India for a regular American is very different than what Indians perceive. So the Indians think about their exports and cities at Mumbai, and they try to compare with America on building size. You cannot compare. There's no comparison.
Yeah,
Uh, in many ways, there is no comparison, and of course, India is growing. But our the education system in America is so poor and is so heavily Christianized in a way that an ordinary student doesn't get the right picture of India. It is still looks like the country of pagans, satans, heretics who have, or heathens, or now the new word will be the kafirs. Uh, so this is the country which is how the American education system is driven, and due to the extreme
sure.
leftist and communist viewpoints on the in the academics, actually, this is how America looks at India and most of the Indians. But they
Mhm.
educated the yoga community, which is 40 million around. For them, the real India is in Rameshwaram, Vrindavan, Rishikesh, and all these areas, which is different.
Absolutely.
So and that population is growing, and that population is actually becoming more spiritual. It's a large population. It's like 10%, more than 10% of the country, and which
Hmm.
is very India centric. But their attraction to India is not IT industry, no call centers, nothing. They don't know anything about that. That in that
Absolutely.
section only knows the spiritual India, the yoga India. So the Prime
Hmm.
Minister Modi is in a famous, very famous in a way, because of the International Yoga Day. More than
True.
anything else, more than anything else, I think that was the biggest and the best strategy of Indian government. Now, coming
Hmm.
close to that is the temples of India, because the pictures that are online available on Instagram of the old temples, that is appeals a lot to the American audience, and that's a different aspect altogether. So when we talk about India, we don't talk about India of the Republic of India. We talk about the India as Bharat, because the Bharat
Exactly.
is what, and that includes Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, because the history is spread across that entire region and not just India. So when we talk about Bharat, then everything changes and all the temples and everything becomes more important. So your project about this preserving the statues and these are returning back is very important in a way uh, for for Americans also. If they want to be honest, they have to return back what they got, and for Europeans, especially British, they must return back because they stole it. They did not take permission from the locals because they did not
Yeah.
deem necessary to take it. So Anuragji, my last question to you is, and I'll leave the floor open to you after that, is that what does an average Indian think about America as a country as far as this issue of statues being stolen uh, and things like that? These people want to. We all want to know here for the audience here. What does an average Indian
You
think
see,
about?
you see, the first is, I joke about this, but I'm kind of serious, and I don't mean to be facetious. But there is nothing like an average Indian. Okay, every Indian is above average, or at least considers himself so. India is so diverse. Every 200 miles, you have a different cuisine, a different language, a different culture, and what have you, right? Um, you know, if I order a strawberry milkshake in San Diego, and if I order a strawberry milkshake in Houston, they're likely to be very similar, right? Well, the one in Texas might be bigger because everything is bigger in Texas. But you know, Indians. So, we need to stop. Americans need to stop looking at Indians or most Asians in a monolith. So that's one. Second, I think the US is very respected for its material advancement, and I think there's no, if you watched a Hollywood movie, if you own a pair of jeans, uh, you know, all of us at some point migrated from eating a samosa to eating a stuffed a bun or a burger or whatever it is. So I think there is huge respect for America for its focus, for its consumption focus. Right now, having said that, I think there is also we also you hear school shootings that happen all the time. You hear about people beyond 50 and 60 really struggling with their retirement and moving into old age homes and losing touch with their family. You hear about people spending their whole lives and not finding that one true love or companionship, and having to go through multiple marriages to figure it out. You look at parents not feeling respected by children, children not feeling loved by parents. So I think so when an Indian looks at the US, he looks at all the material advancement. It's very, very well recognized. Uh, and they also look at the spiritual vacuum, which is also fairly well recognized. Um, I we also look at coming back to the specific issue of heritage that gets taken from India. There's a very different view on the UK and on any other nation. With UK, there is a gripe on colonialism and refusing to reverse colonialism, or rather the only remnant of colonialism. When we look at the US, it looks as a symbol of financial aggression, right? To say that, hey, listen, I am richer than you, so I will walk into your house and take whatever I like. Why? Because I can get away with it. I strongly believe we have hit our what I call a Rosa Parks moment. You see, before Rosa Parks came along, it was absolutely legitimate for African Americans to have different bathrooms and different restaurants and different sit in a different part of the bus, etc., etc. Now, once Rosa Parks came along, and I know there was a lot of factors culminating into a Rosa Parks, but in 5 years, the narrative changed to saying, hey, something that was acceptable before will not be acceptable going forward. So I think as far as our cause is concerned, we've hit our Rosa Parks moment, right? We've had a dozen countries, and all this has happened only in the last 5-6 years. We've had France, Canada, Australia, Singapore, US, a whole bunch of countries that have started giving back heritage to indigenous communities that were forcibly taken from. So I think we've hit that we've hit that threshold. It only boils down to how different states or different museums, at which point do they acknowledge what is just become a new global reality. You see, Um, so I hope a gesture, a strong gesture from the US to give back to our community would help in taking India US relationships. You see, the US could, I mean, let's look at it this way, right? What all can America offer to India or India offer to America? The US could offer to transfer us technology and IP for cheap, to help us militarily, right? To help us with, I don't know, food supplies. Of course, India has more than enough. So you can help with a lot of these things. These things do not matter to me as an individual. They might matter to my GDP. They might matter to me as a nation. It might matter to the central government or state government. But if America has to touch the heart of an Indian, the only emotional gesture that the US has to offer is to say, hey, listen, here is what we forcibly took from you. We'd like to give your heritage back to you. And I think that can be one strong message. And it's a very low hanging fruit. It's a very cheap and an easy message to give. And then hopefully the US will bite.
No, very good point, and I think see one the U.S. If you look at the U.S. laws, then they generally the laws they promote replicas of the original objects in the museum. That's the U.S. law. So if anyone can prove with documentation that this particular artifact belongs to this period in India, and an official request is made through a government channel, then it can be easily repatriated. That's a common law. So many countries have asked it and they got it. So I think someone in India has to make that request if they find specific, and we at Sathology team would love to help you out on that completely. So now, and before we end the session here, just a last point to the audience is that this was the first session with Anurag, and we'll invite Anurag again for another session with more specific points that we want to discuss with him. And one last question has come from the audience is that how just it's a very random question, I think. So is the Indian history which is stolen or kept in the British Museum, does any of those artifacts from India are also kept in American museums also? That's a question.
I'm assuming there's two ways I could interpret the question because
Is that the
I'm a little
British
confused what that question.
yeah, the British artifacts that were taken to from India, are any of those parts of the artifacts which were taken by colonial Britain in US also?
Understand. Yes, absolutely. Yes. There's three different ways in which artifacts have been taken from India. One is taken by the British government under the order of the Queen. The second is artifacts that were taken away by various generals and armies. That like Tipu Sultan's sword, right? It was snatched away from his dead hand and taken, as an example. But there are hundreds, tens and hundreds of examples of various wars where regiments and soldiers and generals took away the plunder of war and took it away to their own homes. The third, of course, is the post 1947 trade. There have been a lot of artifacts that were taken away to the UK and sold off by private owners, which are now all over the world, including the US. So it is not uncommon for a lot of these objects to move around. In fact, very recently, a family discovered a sword of the rulers of Multan, which was, I'm guessing, illegally taken away by the British general that won the war. He didn't bother declaring it to his bosses. And then his great grandchildren have discovered it now, and they've offered it back to the regiment just to wash the stain of their ancestors' legacy. And we're saying that, hey, listen, you have chori ka mal. If you want to give it back, why give it back to another chor? Just give it back to the family. But but yes, the short answer to the question is once these objects leave India, they are sold like any other product. They are not seen with the kind of reverence or importance or emotion that we look at it. And like with any other product, like a used car, they unfortunately gets paraded around, showcased, and sold as if they had no meaning at all, as if they're just piece of wood or stone or brass.
Thank you so much, Anurag, and for coming on the show. And thank you, all the viewers, for watching us live. The video recording will be up on YouTube very shortly. Keep watching, and there's a very interesting episode next session with Anurag after a week or two. Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar. And thank you all for watching.